of time on the road?
I would say I average probably about 3 or 4 months out of the year on the road, something like that.
And mostly in the United States. I know there's a lot of players that talk about the necessity of going over to Europe a lot. Are you there as well?
The majority of it I would say is in Europe.
Okay.
And, the States, I do usually I'll do stuff in the States at universities and come in and do master classes and those kind of things. That's the bulk of what I do in the States is to go fly out to wherever and do a master class and a concert with university bands and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, I haven't played all that much overseas, but I remember the last time I was in Europe and played, it really floored me that I thought, God, I think they hate us because they're just sitting there staring at us. I was like, oh no, that's what we call listening.
Right,
You know?
right, yeah.
Do you think that's just kind of the climate of our country right now?
As far as how the audiences behave,
well, I mean, it
or?
seems like a lot of artists such as yourself are doing a lot of university and scholastic type performances.
Oh yeah. Well, I think a lot of the music has gone in that direction. I know that you're aware of that,
yeah.
and certainly there are more resources, I would say, at the university level to do things than at say your local club.
Yeah.
So oftentimes it tends to be in tandem with both. If I go and do a master class, if there is a decent local venue, I'll do something there as well. But to actually do a tour of American concert venues only, especially if you're not Diana Krall or
right.
someone like that, it's pretty tough, pretty hard to make it happen.
Yeah, I've always said that if people just experience live jazz, they would fully understand.
Yeah. I mean, it depends on the city too. I've gone to a lot of places that have jazz societies that sort of raise money in their way, and usually there's just one or two individuals in each city that are so passionate about it that they'll set up these programs where they have a series and they'll bring in a bunch of different acts and get it funded however they get it funded, and that's also great too. I've done a few of those kind of things where they have a local jazz society will put on a concert, and that's really enjoyable.
Yeah, I remember when I was in school at Kansas, they had, I think it's still around, the Topeka Jazz Workshop was the big thing.
Right.
And and they would bring in Scott Hamilton. It was usually geared around more traditional.
Sure.
But now you're originally from Wisconsin and then moved out east when you were about 15.
Yep.
Was that a positive experience? Because I was just thinking, being from the Midwest and moving east, it was like culture shock.
It was a bit. I mean, I was young enough that I adapted fairly quickly, and I think, while I was in Wisconsin, I was at a high school that was not great for me, and it was, it was a little bit rough, and it was a big school, and I felt like I was getting lost in the shuffle a bit, and I was also an adolescent. I was just a little bit lost on that level too, and so I was a talented musician, but I wasn't enjoying school, and I was getting bullied a little bit by people, and so. When we moved, I moved in the middle of my freshman year of high school, and when I moved into West Hartford, Connecticut, I went to this high school where Bill Stanley, who had passed away a couple years ago, but was this great band director.
Hall, right?
Yeah, exactly. And
now, was Hall the Hall High School that we know today when you got there, or was that?
It was. Oh yeah. No, it was already fully formed and in full swing. And in fact, I mean, it was really in its heyday when I sort of joined there. And what happened was I heard some of their recordings, the high school band recordings, first before we even moved. My dad brought back a couple LPs of what they had done, and I remember putting it on the stereo. And I first of all, I didn't have really any experience with jazz music at all at that point, but I knew when I heard that music for the first time that something special was going on, and I thought, man, how is it possible that these are high school kids doing?
These are your age,
yeah. Yeah, it just kind of blew me away. So when I ended up going and immediately joined the wind ensemble, and that whole first year was just trying my hardest to get into the jazz band, and then I was taking lessons and I was introduced to Charlie Parker, and started learning some of those solos, and finally was good enough that I ended up getting a spot in the big jazz band in my sophomore year. And then it was really off to the races. The thing that happened, and I always kind of point to one date. My 16th birthday was pretty special because we had a nighttime rehearsal, and all those kids in that band had gotten together and bought me a birthday present of 6 jazz LPs, and it was all like, Art Blakey and Miles Davis and Phil Woods and Cedar Walton, and just really hip stuff. I mean, because these kids who are my age, or some of them were maybe about a year or two older than me, they were already listening to all that stuff. They already had been introduced themselves to to Sonny Rollins and to Steps Ahead and all those things, and they were listening to those things. And so for them to make that gesture at age 16 and on my 16th birthday to give me that as a present really made a huge impression. And so as a result, I wore those records out. I mean, I took them home and I just would play them over and over and over again until I could really sing the solos on most of those records.
Well, that's neat that you have had a community like that. I mean, it seems like, I have a daughter that just graduated high school this year and a 12-year-old, and it seems like that older generation nurturing and peers nurturing seems to be lost a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure it's still in the band community.
Yeah.
But
it was a special time. I mean, it was, there was a flip side to it too. I mean, the disciplinary part of that band could be rough, and it was sometimes a little bit a fear-based existence, like as far as educational style. But on the other hand, the thing that I really got out of it, though, is I really did develop a deep love for the history of the music and being around other peer musicians who were interested in learning how to speak that language.
I wanted to ask you about that. I got a chance, very blessed to interview Benny Golson when he came to play here.
Yeah.
And he talked about the foundation of this musical community like what you experienced.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody just trying to figure out stuff together, and that his childhood mate was John Coltrane.
Right.
And that they would call each other and say, what was this guy doing on this and whatnot.
Sure.
I know that you had and still have a very special kinship with Brad Melden.
Right.
When did you guys start? Because I've read some of the things that he's written about your playing, and it's just really one of not only professional respect, but just personal friendship.
Sure.
It's so cool. But talk about that relationship.
Yeah, well, I'll never forget the day that I heard him for the first time. He was rehearsing. He was the pianist rehearsing with like the jazz choir or something like that. He was accompanying them, and it was in my freshman year. And I remember I was walking down the hallway, and I happened to walk past the auditorium where they were rehearsing, and I heard this choir singing. But the thing that drew me is I thought, who is the piano player playing with this choir? Because I thought for sure it had to be some professional musician that they had called in to rehearse with them. And I'm not even sure that I had even said hello to Brad yet at that point. I was really brand new in West Hartford. I was brand new to the school, and so I walked in and I just sat for about 10 or 15 minutes just kind of like watching this kid play for this choir. And I thought to myself, man, I gotta know who this guy is. And so then, when I actually did get into the jazz band the next year, obviously we were in the band together, and we started to get to know each other that way. And we just started hanging out together, and we started doing our first gigs together. We used to go down into Hartford to this place called the 880 Club. We were about 17 years old. We were juniors in high school, and we got this gig. And every Wednesday night we'd play with guys who were much older than us, who were 20 years our senior. And that's how we started to learn how to play. And I was, reading out of the real book and just, making all the mistakes that musicians make. But we would make I don't know, $15 or $20 on the gig each, and then we'd go the next day and we'd blow it all on records, and I'd come back to his place, to his parents' house, and we'd go up into his room and we'd drop the needle on whatever we had gotten the night before. And that was kind of a cool, fairly regular ritual for us. Just discovering the music together, having kind of a friend who, cared and loved the history of jazz as much as I did. And also, it wasn't just that. It was also the fact that he was a really, really special individual. The world knows now what a special gift that he has. Mm-hmm. But it was really apparent even then that to be around someone who, could listen to a jazz recording and then go down to his parents' spin it and just sort of start to already assimilate, Bud Powell, like within 20 minutes. I was just like, whoa, okay, this is someone that was really inspiring and someone to live up to, And Pat Zimmerly was that way too. The tenor saxophonist, Pat Zimmerly, was 2 years older than Brad and me. And he was a big influence on both of us because Pat was pretty fully formed in high school as an improviser. He was, had a lot of Mike Brecker stuff down, really down cold on his horn. And so, to be around those two guys, not just those two, but there were a few other musicians too who were really taking it very seriously. But yeah, Brad especially, there is sort of a kinship there that is special and has continued to be special.
Well, I was thinking to the duo recording two of you did a number of years ago, and it stands up there. I know there are a lot of duo recordings. My first thought was how sad it was that the Concord series, that Carl Peterson passed away, and that duo series stopped.
Yeah.
Because there were some good ones and some amazing ones.
Yeah.
I was thinking of the one with Chris Potter and
Kenny Werner. Sure.
And then Gary Foster and Alan Broadbent. And what really struck me is the really great duos, the Stan Getzes and the Kenny Barons, they just seem to interpret and know what the other one's doing. And that was when in fact, I downloaded the MP3s last night and was listening to it, and I'm like, you just know that's a relationship that's built on a different way.
Yeah, there's a history there that I can't deny, and even to this day, when I do get to play with Brad, which is not that often, although we're actually playing the Vanguard coming up, which is exciting. But I'm excited about that. But every time that we've had a chance to play over the years, I feel like his sense of me as an accompanist and the way we relate to each other on that level has always seemed really natural, and he puts me at ease in a certain way.
You don't have to worry about where anything is.
No. I mean, everything is covered, and I always kind of joke that when I did that duo recording with him, when people ask me about it, I said, I didn't have to worry about anything except playing pretty melodies. He's going to make me sound great, because all I have to do is just play the stuff that I know is going to sound good, and everything else is just, he's going to come up with something amazing that's going to complement that. So it's always been that way, and he understands my time feel, and he understands where I'm coming from musically, and I think our shared roots have a lot to do with that.
I loved it. I thought I wrote it down somewhere. I love this quote that I read. He wrote. He says, "When I hear his playing, speaking of you, I hear everything that he and I absorbed together from the time we were just getting started."
Right.
And I love that. One of the things that I heard you just say that I wanted to go back and touch on was you were talking about playing with players that were older than you.
Right.
And it seems today that so many very fine players are in groups that are of the like age group,
right,
and whatnot, and even young players who are trying to get gigs are with
their band is all the same age, basically.
And maybe not to the extent you were, but I grew up around here where you played with little 13-piece big bands.
Sure.
You learned to play softer when the old guy playing lead alto broke your reed or something like that. So maybe you'll shut up now.
Right.
But can you talk about the importance of that age mentoring?
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, honestly, I wish I had more of it. I wish I had more of a chance to play with some of my mentors, and I know that the times when I have been exposed to those people have often been the times that I've made the most progress. I remember when I applied for Betty Carter's Jazz Ahead, and I got into that, and just to be able to hang out with her for a week was amazing because she basically taught me to stick up for myself. I remember coming in and being very insecure, and she always wanted people to bring in their own compositions and write new music for her. She didn't want to hear things done the same way. She didn't want you to come in and play Green Dolphin Street the way Miles Davis played it or something like that. If you played a standard, she wanted you to arrange it in your own way. So I remember a few days into that program with her, I'd written a tune to play with the band for this concert that was coming up with Jazz Ahead, and I was feeling pretty sheepish about it. I was kind of like, kind of shuffling around saying, "Oh, all right, guys, if you don't mind, if you can play this tune." And she saw that I was sort of half-stepping, and she said, "You get over here right now." And she took me in the other room, and she was short, and she backed me up against the wall, and she said, "You need to stick up for yourself right now, or I'm going to steamroll your ass." That's what she said. That's what she said to me. And I said, "Yes."
I heard that she was a force of nature.
Yeah, and I said, "Yes, Miss Carter." But you know what? It was kind of rough. It was kind of tough love, but it actually really, she was making a point that was really important. She said, "I wouldn't have selected you for this if I didn't think you had something to say. So you need to get up there and say it, and don't feel, don't try and make excuses for yourself. Just stand up and be who you are." And I'll really never forget that. That was a really good example of being around someone who has seen everything, and had something really important to say to me, and said it. I remember another time playing with this drummer Jimmy Madison, who is in New York City, and he's probably maybe 20 or 25 years older than I am. And I was playing at Augie's before it was Smoke, and I sat in with him with this guitar player Freddie Bryant, and we were playing impressions or something. I was like 21 or something like that, and after it was over, he went to the bar and he's having a drink, and I said, "Jimmy, it sure was good to play with you." And he said, "Yeah, I can't say the same about you." And I said, "Well, why?" And he said, "You played about 8 choruses on that song, and your solo was over after the 3rd chorus." And he said, "If you ever play with me again, don't ever do that." And in the first instance that he said that, my first inclination was to get angry. And then I kind of, in a split second, I thought about back to the performance, and I thought, "Oh, he's right."
It was over, and I just kept going.
He was exactly right, and it's in that moment I just thought, "Oh yeah, you're right. Thank you." And I said thanks. I understand. He's like, "Yeah, no problem," and so those moments when you have a mentor, especially someone who's willing to really be honest with you in that way, even if it's a little rough. I've appreciated that, because those are the moments that I really have made progress, because it just cuts to the quick, and you realize that, yeah, I need to work on this thing that I haven't addressed yet. So
that is inherently, I mean, I'm sure in the professional realm it's a little bit more prevalent, but I know in the academic realm, boy, that's such a scary moment. I mean, I had some teachers that were, very blunt.
Yeah.
But it was we never took it personally, because we knew it was for a higher purpose,
right?
It was a higher calling.
That's right.
That you had to be aware of something. But no, that's I was just thinking about one of your recordings. I get it piecemeal. I get it person to person, but recording with Stan Getz's classic rhythm.
Sure.
I mean, I always wanted to ask you about that. I mean, because I know Victor from his time here, and just how struck I was that there's never a note that he plays that isn't with intensity. And I got a chance to work when I was in the Abersol camp as a kid with Rufus Reed and Sir
right.
and worked with Kenny Barron at a clinic in Kansas City. But can you talk about working with people like that?
Sure. Well, that particular project was really, it was really a gift for me. I mean, I had the opportunity through someone who was underwriting that to bring those people together, and this person asked me, if you had your dream rhythm section, who would you want to play with? And at that point in time, I was really into Getz at that point in time, and I was really enamored of that period of time, that period of his playing. And I said, I'd love to play with that rhythm section. I'd love to play with those guys. And so he said, "Let's make it happen." So we called them up. We got them all on the same page. We set up a rehearsal. We set up the recording date, and we did it. And that was a really good growing experience for me, because it sort of dovetails into what Betty Carter said. Because I really had to step up and be a leader on that session with my elders, and be able to say, "Okay, this is how these songs go, and this is how I want this to happen." And I was nervous. I remember calling that first rehearsal, and those guys show up, and I'm thinking, "What am I doing here? What am I doing with these guys?" But then we got down to business, and we started playing my tunes. And it was interesting, because especially Victor. They all were very professional, and they all did an amazing job. But Victor really worked his way into my heart on that session, because from the rehearsal through the session, Victor would look at the music and say, "All right, what are we going to do? What do you want here? What am I doing it right here? do you want this softer? Do you want this faster? How do you want it? And like he was really actively involved in kind of picking my brain as to how this session was going to go. And so I'll always have a soft spot for Victor Lewis for that reason, because he wasn't just mailing it in. It wasn't just a session for him.
Yeah. No, it's too important to him.
Yeah, and the other guys were great too. And I learned stuff. Like I remember I wrote this tune Nod Nord, which has some odd time sections, and I wanted Kenny to solo through it. And Kenny was adamant. He said, "Nope, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to solo on that one." And I asked him a couple times, and then I realized, okay, I got to let that go, because it just wasn't something that he felt. Yeah, it wasn't his thing. So you kind of learn those things as you go along when you're dealing with guys that have 20 and 30 years of more experience. And then also, it's a different feeling playing with a rhythm section like that than it is playing with your peers too. I mean, the language is different, and the feeling of the language is different, because they were there at the outset of all that stuff. So, playing with that rhythm section, it's almost like, the only way I could describe it is like getting into a huge Cadillac or something like that, and you're not, you know what I mean? It's
Why don't
like,
they make cars like this anymore?
well, yeah, and it's like it may not be the fastest car either, but it's just like it's just going to feel like this luxurious ride on the road, Yeah. And that's what that felt like. I had to realize that I can't get away with just playing all my chopsy stuff with these guys, because that's not going to work. I have to really try and play pretty and try and play spacious and come to them, and come to feeling their feeling, and not just try and enforce my whatever I have onto them. So that was a big part of a big learning experience for me too, was to try and allow myself to meld with their mentality in a way.
Yeah, I remember when we gave Victor an honorary doctorate a couple of years ago, and it's, for me, Stan Getz the reason why I'm playing music.
Sure.
And it's always difficult for me to not be that Stan Getz geek that comes up to really great players and goes, "Hey, why don't you talk about this guy instead of you?"
Right.
But I asked him, I said that one of the things I thought was the most amazing thing of his playing on, it was the Voyage.
Oh, yeah.
On that Black Hawk album, was that he was not very active.
Right.
And he says, because it wasn't supposed to be.
Right.
It's like, the music tells you what you're supposed to do.
Sure.
And no, I wanted to ask about that, because you live one of my dreams. So.
Yeah, no, I was so lucky to be able to do that. I felt very, very lucky, and still feel fortunate that I had that experience.
Well, let me ask you, what do you look for in the people that you play with, the groups that you put together?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it depends on what I'm looking for the project, but generally, different music that I write requires different things. But generally, if you're talking about just, if I'm calling guys up just to play some tunes and stuff like that, I want guys, first of all, with good time. I need guys to have consistent time and good time and good feel. And that means to me, people who are gonna listen to each other, and not just barrel through without any cause for concern for anybody else around them. So that's a big thing for me is finding guys, good time, good feel, sense of dynamics, sense of conversation, sense of humor. I think I want people to have a good time on the bandstand. To bring a good vibe. That's why I love Matt Wilson so much. Is that he always brings an incredible, humorous, and beautiful vibe to the bandstand.
Isn't he an amazing human being?
He's incredible. I mean, truly incredible.
Things he's gone through personally, but still, you think about if there's one way that a human being can deal with tragedy, the way he has, that you would hope that you would do. Yeah, it's him.
Yeah, I've never seen someone so strong, really. I mean, he's one of the strongest human beings I've ever seen, and he's always, I admire him so much because, I saw him sort of at the outset when he was starting to become a real leader, a real band leader. I mean, I was in his first quartet, basically. After he made his record with Dewey, I was like the next tenor player after Dewey played with him on his debut recording. So, when we started traveling together and I saw how he would handle himself as a band leader, it was just astonishing to me. I mean, it was just always amazing. I was always really so impressed by his skills, his human skills, his musical skills, his ability to be responsible and yet light, with everybody, and to handle every different personality that would come at him with positivity and this light that shines from inside him. I don't know where that comes from, but he's an amazing person.
I was always struck from when I was at Tennessee. I got a chance to play with him as a faculty member, and then brought him into Nebraska as to work with the band and with the students. And it seemed like to me that in all instances he was interested in finding what the rut was and steering you completely away from it.
Right.
And like he worked with the band, and then we went to call him out.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Matt Wilson, he had found 2 heads, like dummy heads backstage that had headdresses from the opera.
Yeah.
And he walked out like the most serious person on the planet with these 2 heads, and then he had them bow, and then he bowed. And instantly, the tension level in the audience, was gone.
Yeah.
And then instantly the band was just like, okay, we're going to have some fun.
Yeah.
But no, that's wonderful. I think about your playing. One of the things that really captivates me is you have this prodigious technique that's amazing, but great time. Mm-hmm. What were some of the things that you've done to work on time? Because I know a lot of people who have great technique, and can't find the mark.
Sure. Well, I was always really drawn to those improvisers that had really unassailable time. I always say that's always a word that I use, unassailable, like just bulletproof time. And I think the guys that I always think of are like Getz, Stitt, Bird, Freddie Hubbard, who are some other, Lester Young, Oscar Peterson, Wes Montgomery. I mean, there are certain guys through the history of the music, Roy Haynes. There's certain guys on all different instruments that are just so dyed in the wool. J.J. Johnson, where it's just perfect time, where the time is just you could put them on stage with nobody else around them, and they could play an entire concert solo, and you wouldn't miss anything, And that's the kind of player that I've always inspired to be. So was always transcribing those guys, Sonny Rollins is another guy. I was always transcribing solos, Johnny Griffin, where I wanted to have that vocabulary down in the way they had it down. So, I'm an unabashed, I've said this in clinics before, I'm an unabashed fan of, at a certain point in your career, being a complete and utter copycat. I think it's, for me, it was a really important stage to go through, and I think it's gotten a little bit of a bad rap these days. Like, I think people sometimes talk about, you're just transcribing solos and you're just going to regurgitate what you heard before, but I think even the people that would say something like that aren't really giving enough lip service to the fact that we all have to go through that stage to get anywhere else. So as a result, I did spend a lot of time. The story that I always tell is about Johnny Griffin. When I was 18 years old, I had jaw surgery and I couldn't play for 7 weeks. And it was the summer after I graduated high school. And so, as a get well gift, one of my friends, the drummer in our high school jazz band, gave me Thelonious in Action. And it was my first Thelonious Monk record. I'd never heard Monk either. So he gave me this live record, and Johnny Griffin, Roy Haynes and Ahmed Abdul Malik on bass. And I heard rhythming. I heard this rhythm changes, and it's just, it's just this epic tenor solo on that song with just tons of blues and so funky, but the time is just like insane. It's like a locomotive going through. And so for that summer, I thought, I like this so much, and I was listening to it so much, I'm going to write down this solo. And so I wrote down the entire solo over the next, however many weeks it took, and it really was painstaking. Sometimes it was like just two notes at a time, and then I'd rewind. Okay, did I get those 2 notes right? Okay, yeah. Next 3 notes. Okay, are those 3 notes right? And I did it away from the horn, and then when I finally got the wires off my jaw, I could play again. I started just very slowly and painstakingly learning this solo from beginning to end, just measure by measure. To the point where when I went away to school, when I went away to college in my freshman year, I had it completely memorized. And over that summer, practicing that solo for the 2 or 3 months that I did, revolutionized my tenor playing. I mean, it really did. Just that one solo, just getting so deep into it, so deep into every detail, the articulation and the, being able to play those lines so slowly and then working them up really, really slowly until I could play them at the tempo that Johnny played them. And you know,
And we should also add at a time where there wasn't the app where you could slow things down.
right. So I did it. Yeah, I did it all in real time. Yeah, and I did that with a few solos. I'm not the most prodigious transcriber in the world. I've probably in my life, I'll bet you I've done maybe 10 or 15 solos total. And that's about it. Like I have, you know, I'm not one of those people that has hundreds of solos in their folio.
But one experience like you talk about can be
Well,
years
yeah,
worth of,
that's right, and
it generates years later.
that's right, and so